Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this video we're going to take a look at chaining the Safecall operator in Kotlin, and we'll also look at the Elvis operator. I'm going to start by creating a class here, and I'll give this a property. Let's say val name of type string. This is a valid class by itself, it just has one property which is name. You do have to be sure to put val or var there though, otherwise you're not creating a property, you're just creating a constructor parameter. Now let's create a main function, and we'll have a val person of type person, which I'll set equal to a person object, and we can pass a name in here. So how do we get the length of that name property if we want it? Well, we can do print line to print it out if we want person.name.length. So I've got a chain references to properties here, and we get 3 when we run it. Now if you introduce nullable types into the mix here, you can potentially end up with several different ways in which this can go wrong. Let's just duplicate this line that creates the person object, and I'm going to comment out the original, and we'll set person equal to null. And to be allowed to do that, I have to say that this variable is nullable, and that means I need to put a question mark after the type, as though I'm questioning whether it's really going to be this type or not. The variable will always have this type, but it could be pointing at nothing, it could be referring to null. Now we get an error here, right over this dot where I'm doing person.name, and as we've seen I can fix that using the Safecall operator. So again, a question mark goes directly after the variable that is in question. So let's put a question mark there. And now, even though name is not nullable, Kotlin gives me an error where I try to do name.length. After all, this whole thing might end up being null. If person is set to null, like we've just done here, this Safecall operator won't attempt to access name. It will just return null. And then effectively we'll be doing null.length, and that can't be allowed. And one way to fix that is to put a question mark here as well after name. So we use the Safecall operator also there. And then if this whole thing is null, Safecall will return null instead of accessing length. So this now works. If I run it, I expect to see null coming out in the console. But if I uncomment the original version, so person now has a name of Bob and it isn't a null object anymore, now we get the length correctly. Another potential problem is that name could be null as well. Here it's not allowed to be null, but if I put a question mark after the string, we've said that name can potentially also be null. Let's duplicate this line again. I'll move that down and we'll comment out the original. And now I want to create a valid object, but with a null name. So this Safecall operator will also correctly handle this situation. In this case, I haven't put a question mark after person, so this can't actually be null. This Safecall operator here is redundant, but it doesn't do any harm. And when we try to access person name, that can now be null. And this Safecall operator handles that, and instead of accessing length, it will just return null. So when I run it, I get null coming out on the console. But if I comment that out and go back to the original version and run that, then it all executes with no problems. Now sometimes in the case where a variable or multiple variables involved in an expression can be null, in the event that one or more of them is null, you don't actually want to return null from the expression. And in that case we can use the Elvis operator. The Elvis operator looks like this. Let's put question mark colon. And after this we specify what we want the expression to evaluate to if the stuff on the left of the Elvis operator evaluates to null. So in this case I might decide, okay, if name is null or person is null, I want to return 0 rather than null. So it doesn't in a sense matter what's going on here. It doesn't matter how complicated the expression is. The question is, can it evaluate to null? And if it can, the Elvis operator will return 0 when the stuff on the left is null. Otherwise it will return whatever this expression evaluates to. Let's run this. So this is fine, we still get 3. But for example, if I uncomment this and comment out the original and run this, now we get 0. In this case, because the name is null, and that's causing this entire expression to evaluate to null. So this expression, which includes the Elvis operator, evaluates to 0. Similarly, if I comment that out and we uncomment this, now if I run this, person itself is null, so this will evaluate to null, and then this Safecall operator ensures we don't attempt to access length, and the whole thing becomes null. And the Elvis operator says, okay, the stuff on my left is null, therefore I will return 0, and we get 0. The Elvis operator is called the Elvis operator because if you turn it on its side, supposedly it looks a bit like Elvis Presley. I'm not joking, that is the reason for its name, and it actually predates Kotlin. Okay, so that's it for this video. Do try this stuff out. You can only learn to program by actually trying it out. A video is just a source of information, but it's like learning the piano or the guitar. You've really got to practice it in order to properly learn it. And until next time, happy coding.